You are now listening to Bull Hook Golf, an unfiltered golf podcast taking you inside the ropes with unfiltered stories, insights, analysis, and exclusive interviews. Welcome back, everybody, to Bull Hook Golf, the podcast. This is episode number 65, or should we call it the day that golf was bought? So, man, Bobby, I'm telling you right now that this episode, we're going to breeze through a couple quick things here because the Memorial Tournament, the sad thing is that the Memorial Tournament
was a U.S. Open.
It was phenomenal. If you really did, it was an incredible tournament. I mean, I love seeing the difficulty of the golf course on the back nine and just how many guys, like, there were so many swings in terms of the leaders to where guys were up at the top of the leaderboard, big names. And then all of a sudden you see double bogeys and they drop all the way down and then can't recover. It was quite the tournament. So we're going to recap that super fast. We're going to give our cliff notes on that. Rose Zhang, this is your shout out right here because we're not going to talk about it further, but congrats on your first win for
I watched it. Did you watch it?
I did not.
Yeah, it's Liberty. That's your kind of your peeps right there. I thought you'd watch it. She was impressive. I will just say that
I saw the highlights.
Yeah, she was the face of the game. She's the face of the game. It's official.
First professional tournament and first professional wins. So that's something Tiger Woods did not do. So I think she might be the next Tiger Woods, but for the female game and for the LPGA Tour. So congrats, Rose. The RBC Canadian Open we've got this week. I don't know if we're really going to touch upon that at all. I apologize. No, we're probably not. Maybe a penny bet. And it's going to be a quick penny bet too, because I don't even know who's in the field. I know the guys because I saw them on TV walking out of the meeting with Jay Monahan. And that's the big one today. We're going to talk about the PGA Tour, the DP World Tour, and the Public Investment Fund coming together on a merger. We're going to give our thoughts and we're going to give you the real scoop because here's the thing. We're not paid pockets. We're not going to be sitting here like some of the media on TV and some of the people that are putting out some canned responses that are just like, oh, great, it's going to grow the game, all this contention, blah, blah, blah. But we'll get into that some more as we get into it. Let's start super quick, Bobby, with the Memorial Tournament. How impressive was Viktor Hovland and your guy, actually, I should say our guy, because you really brought me into this with Denny McCarthy.
Yeah, I thought he was going to get it done. He looked, we've seen so many collapses. It's natural to collapse for a first time winner under pressure, but he looked so good. And I was waiting for some kind of drama and he kept striping it down the middle. He kept making putts as he usually does. I mean, we all talk about what a great putter is, but the fact is he's a great ball striker too. So that gets a little bit swept under the rug when you are that high up on tour stats, putting it. I've seen it myself numerous times in front, and I've been propping him. Turned you onto him, and then he just made kind of a late. But you kind of make a late bogey like that. But I will tell you, I was telling you early in the week how hard I thought this golf course was, and I had mentioned, we agreed that we thought it was going to be about 12 under. I had mentioned it could be as low as 9 under. I didn't think it was going to be 7, but brother, when we got out there on Thursday, you could tell. And I was telling my guy the whole time, every single hole that we hit needed to show some serious discipline off the tees and hit some conservative, really ultra conservative tee shots and get it in the fairway because, if you missed the fairway by 2 inches, it was basically, as I described last week, you were chipping out. And that's what the whole week was when you got out of position, you chipped out. So enough about that.
Well, hang on. One quick comment. Yeah. Your guy, SH Cam,
he made a run.
I was paying attention to that entire week. And man, you're right, Bobby. That kid is the next up and comer. I mean, he's got so much game. Some of the shots that he was hitting. Whew.
He is, and he fucking ships it too. He ships it off the tee. He stings. He hits shots, man. That's the best way I can say it. Any shot that you want to call on him, he hits shots. And he has, I don't know if we're just in honeymoon stage, but I had a big lecture with him where I was telling him that, the Koreans I work for, I was telling him that I felt like I was putting it on his shoulders that he needed to bring the KJ Choi back to Korean golf is what I was.
I like
and
that.
So a little grace, a little poise, a little no emotion, and not, even though they're my really good friends, and not to blow your shit. And Like the other Koreans, like Sungjae, like Siwoo, like Danny, well, ex-Danny Lee, Sung Kang, Ben On's pretty mellow out there. But I just kind of laid that to him, and I felt like I kept him calm all weekend. We have a great relationship going. I even had a couple caddies that we were paired with come up to me, and they're like, man, we were paired with this guy a million times on the Corn Ferry Tour. He was a little bit out of control sometimes, maybe under pressure, but it's the first time we've ever seen him laugh. So he's giving me the reins to direct him around these golf courses the rookie year. And I told him, I go, I only need to do this year. And when I can give somebody advice that I've seen for 15 years in a row, it's nice to have somebody that's standing next to you that can execute, number one. And number two is receiving the information, or I don't even want to call it information. I just want to call it experience, And I told him all during the practice rounds, I go, when this thing starts getting out of control, if you drive it in the rough and we don't like the way it's looking, we're going to chip it out. And he fucking talked me into one on Thursday, and he got out away from there. He got out of there with bogey on 17, but I'll make it real quick. He whipped one real far left on 17, which is an unbelievably hard hole. And he was under a tree that's been shaded, you know what I mean? So the rough's nasty. There's a creek in front, and it's an obvious chip out to me, and he's putting a 7-iron down. And I go, where? And I start dropping F-bombs right off the bat, because Koreans understand F-bombs, right? And I go, where do you think you're fucking going with this, right? And he goes, oh, I just, I think it come out good. And I go, this isn't fucking coming out good. And of course, I drop about 4 F-bombs, and I look over, and there's a boom mic standing next to me. And I'm like, oh, wow, I finally got the next Korean superstar, and he's going to get in his letter in his locker tomorrow. And I'm going to be good night, Irene, with the $5,000 mystery fine or whatever. So we went through this. We stacked the whole golf course up. I held my ground for about 3 minutes. And finally, I wasn't winning the battle. And he goes, I think this come out easy. I go, you know what looks easy to me? 100-meter shot right down the middle. And then we stick to our game plan, Matt, and we get a putt for par. And if we make bogey, we make bogey. And he goes, no, this one on me, right? And I told him, I go, this is the only one. And I gave it to him on Thursday, thank God. And it came out fucking sniping left somehow in the rough. It was ugly. I thought it went in the creek. It stayed short of the creek. He got out of there with bogey, and I was cleaning. He had about a little 4-footer for bogey. And as I'm cleaning his ball, he goes, you so mad at me? And I'm like, I'm not mad at you. I'm experienced. This was our big talk. And he made the bogey, and he handed me the ball. He gives me a little fist pump, and he goes, okay, still make bogey. That's only one this week. And he was pretty disciplined from there. But even though it doesn't sound like we played great and we finished tied,
you guys played fucking great.
We did. Because if you were watching, Matt, you knew that we turned in 4 over par. We were 4 over par on Friday, and then he hit that run. He made that he chipped in on 14. He made that nice. He buried that fucking eagle at 15. And we got back to even. We got back to even par. Now all of a sudden you're in the golf tournament with 6 unders leading. But we're no idiots out there. When you turn to 16, 17, and 18, you just want to get it to the house. And if you make 3 bogeys in a row, at least you have some cushion. And I was happy to see that he had built up that cushion and got us through to the weekend. He missed a little tap in 3-footer on Friday too.
I saw the tour cast.
Yeah, on Friday to go to 2 over. Yeah. And I was shocked when I turned on my phone and I saw the cut hanging at 2 over for a while, because I'm like, what is going on? Why aren't these scores moving? And then they progressively moved to a healthy 3 over, almost went to 4 over. And then we got off to a great start on Saturday. You saw we got it to a couple under on Saturday, and
he was playing.
Gave a couple back, which was no big deal because we're still even par, and it's fucking $20 million purse, Matt. You're just 35th or better. The guy makes $100,000, and he didn't warm up that great on Sunday. He definitely didn't have his A stuff. He plotted his way around the golf course. We got into another little on number. We were playing with Luke Donald. Donald's game's back a little bit, by the way. I'm going to give you a scouting report on that. He's been making some cuts. He looks really good out there. He's obviously the best short game player that I've ever seen. By far the best bunker player I've ever seen. Although my guy, S.H. Kim, I'm going to tell you right now, is probably the best bunker player that I've ever worked for. Well, maybe he's tied with Siwoo, because Siwoo's pretty good and Sungjae's pretty good too. But we got to number 6 out there where Cantley, I don't know if you saw it, but Cantley made a triple, I think, on Friday or Saturday, trying to knock it over the water from the rough. And I was convinced. We drove it into the rough there, and it was really sitting down in like an old divot. So we didn't know how it was going to come out. And there was a lot of grass in front of it. And here we are going through this same discussion again, right? And I'm dropping the F-bombs and that kind of stuff. He goes, okay, your choice. And I go, fucking hit it out there 40 meters. 40 meters maximum. He's like, maximum 40 meters? I'm like, maximum 40 meters, because I'm trying to leave him on 80, 85 to 90, a full 60 that's going to spin back in a spinny area. and he chipped it out there, and it came out left and hot, and it didn't go in the hazard. It stayed in the fairway, and he fucking nipped off a shearing downhill lie. He nipped this little 60 degree to what I thought was like 6 inches or something, because we were so excited. And it's always nice when a player hands you the club and goes, thank you. That he said thank you. And he said that to me like 3 times last week. So we just got around there. We just got around there on Sunday, 4 over. We didn't play horrible. We didn't play great. I mean, we doubled, we made a double. We made a double on 14 where Siwoo made double on Sunday. That little hole, you hit a fucking 5-iron off the tee, right? We missed it 2 days in a row, and I was so pissed at him and in the right rough. And I'm just like, it's a fucking 5-iron and it's 45 yards long, And I just think that sometimes, I don't know if it's an older player or more of a rookie thing, but if you naturally think it's a 5-iron off the tee, maybe your concentration goes down a little bit and you're like, oh, it's only a 5-iron, and there's a creek on the left, and he kind of hung on to it and got out of position, and we kind of made a mess at that hole. But it was a nice week. T41, we made some points. We're hanging at our number right around 70 or 71, I think now, and it was a successful mission, because honestly, during the practice rounds, he wasn't looking that great. And he was like, I just want to play 4 days. I just want to play 4 days. So he got it done, and I'm going to tell you right now, he's the next Korean superstar. I told you off air, he is super raw. He's got all the shots. He hits it a long way. He has a fantastic wedge game. He doesn't like the right to left ball, which I personally love as a caddy. And he chips it good. He putts it good. He's got a fantastic bunker game, a great fairway bunker game, but he's raw as shit right now. There's so much talent there that we're just going to have to pick and choose our battles. And when he gets a little confidence going here towards the end of the year, I could see him doing some, you never predict a guy's going to win, but I could see him having some seriously good finishes and possibly getting into these designated events next year. If we have designated events, I'm not sure what's going on. Quick scroll down the leaderboard. Hovland takes McCarthy down in a playoff, right? Scotty Scheffler has to wait about 4 hours after shooting 73.
I thought I nipped it.
74.
You should have seen my betting ticket on that
6 under. Siwoo scaring him all day long until the backside till he made a double on 14, and he wasn't making any putts. Rory looked like me out there with his wedge game on Sunday, driving it in the right spots, missing greens with wedges, finishes 3 under. And then a nice packet at 2 under at T9. Ricky Fowler, Adam Scott, Fitzpatrick. We played with David Lipsky. He was leading the golf tournament for a long time. We played with David Lipsky the first 2 days. And I've always been a fan of Lipsky, and I told you that he's sneaky good, but it always came down to his putting. And the last 2 tournaments, he's been working with, I don't give Cam McCormick props, but as you know, you're my witness, I do give him props when it comes to short game and putting. And David was making a lot of putts. And my guy even said to me after Friday, he goes, oh, yeah, I think David Lipsky win. And I go, I don't think David Lipsky, if he pops his cherry, it's going to be in this event, right? Because it's such a huge event. And David has not been in that situation on this tour. And he had a rough day on Sunday. He still finished 12th. He shot 77. And that's all I got on the Memorial, because we got big shit to talk about
We
today.
do. I mean, Canada? We do have the penny bets, though. Hang on a second. So
just say you went 2-0.
I went 2-0. I took you out. Scotty Scheffler beats John Rahm, and then you got Ricky Fowler beats Patrick Cantlay. You looked good there for a while.
They were close. They were close, but I never.
But you knew. And how many pennies am I up now from that?
Well, can I lie and say 5,000? But I think the tax is 6.
It's 6,000. Oh, I already know.
I know you do. So Matt went 2-0, and I told everybody 3 weeks ago, this is no shock. I've been in this situation before, and I felt on tilt with my picks. So if this league the live bets are the only ones I can seem possibly ever win, and I think we only have one more year.
You gave up C1, Kim. You gave up C1, so
I think we have only one more year. Those live bets, my theory.
Well, here we go. Penny bets for the RBC Canadian Open. Okay. I go first. I'm going Mackenzie Hughes.
Oh wow, you're going with Mackenzie Hughes?
Yep.
I'm going to go with Matt Fitzpatrick. Okay, that's it. Can we just tell people that one? I'm going to tell you right. I'm going to put your Mackenzie Hughes in there because he's Canadian. And he's a great player. But one of these 8 or 9 players are going to win, folks. Justin Rose, Rory McIlroy, Mackenzie Hughes, Fitzpatrick, Terrell Hatton, Corey Connors, Tommy Fleetwood, Cam Young, Shane Lowry. You're on your own. Pick them from there. The rest is everybody else, including my guy, S.H. Kim. Oh, I got to tell everybody I'm not there because my man S.H. Kim decided to play late on Sunday night. I got a last-minute fill-in because my boys are turning 6 and 10 this week. And at 58 years old, I'm not missing that anymore. And you don't think I work for a good Korean? because he said, go home. Don't worry. Go home. Thanks for the help.
Well, happy birthday to your boys.
So let me intro everybody. I was just minding my own business with Rory today, walking out of Costco, got in the car with $241 worth of supplies that we don't really need, like everybody does at Costco. That's actually a low day. And I get this text from Matt, this screenshot from Matt saying something about, LIV and the PIF and that kind of stuff, and they've merged. So I go, Lori, I go, oh, Matt just sent me this thing, and I saw the CNBC in the background, right? And I go, oh, this is some kind of fake news bullshit, right? So I didn't really pay attention. And she's like, you're driving, put the phone down. But I'm like, well, let me go to Twitter, right? And you got it before anybody really hit it on Twitter too. You sent it to me, and then it starts blowing up, and my phone starts blowing up, and that kind of stuff. And that's my intro. You pick it up from here, boss man.
Oh boy, this was the day that I will always remember where I was. It's one of those moments I feel like, where was I when I heard the information that Saudi Arabia had purchased the game of golf? And that right there, so the PGA Tour, DP World Tour, and Public Investment Fund have merged. I woke up to it. So I actually woke up. My guy, Tony, he actually sent me, before I woke up this morning, the very first thing that I sent to you from the CNBC interview with Jay Monahan, and you call him the governor. He is Yasir Al-Musassin, or what? I'll figure that out in a second.
Saw the pronunciation. Let's call him Gov. The Gov.
The Gov. We're going to refer to him as the Gov, or I might just call him Yasir. I don't know. But with that, all of a sudden, I'm about to go to my personal trainer, Ando, and at PFS Systems. And sure enough, he starts telling me that Wyndham was just in right before me. So there wasn't a ton of info, right off of the bat. More stuff leaked out as it got going, and as, the player meeting happened and everything with Jay. But he's like, I look up at ESPN, and all of a sudden they got it across the bottom, and I go, hey, Wyndham, did you know that you were merging with LIV Golf? And he's like, what? He's like, yeah, it's on the TV. So apparently Wyndham went out, started making some phone calls, called his agent, called some other players. Like, what the hell is going on? Because he didn't have any word of it whatsoever. And then I started asking you, I'm like, hey, does anybody know what's going on here? Like, do the players have any idea as to what just occurred? Nobody. And as it started coming out, Rory did, my assumption was, okay, this is why Rory's been so frustrated. This is why he's been a mental case. This is why he didn't, after the Masters, he took some time off and everything, and gave up $3 million and so forth. And then all of a sudden it's like Rory didn't know. No. And I'm like, wait a second. Cause I asked you, I was like, hey, can you reach out to somebody, some of these guys from the Players Advisory Council, and see if those guys knew? Because obviously the majority of the players did not know. Wyndham didn't know. And
none of them knew. Not one of them do. I believe there might've been 5 people total that knew. Obviously Jay, Keith Pelly, Yasir, Governor Yasir, and I think maybe Jimmy Dunn and somebody else was a mediator, and those were the only, maybe a couple other brass members of the PGA Tour, but no one knew. Completely blindsided. I didn't believe it like you for the longest time. Instead, I thought it was just fake news blowing up, and then I saw the interview with Jay and the governor, which I thought was kind of shed some light onto everything as much as it could, because they were very vague with their answers. But what a day. What a day, man.
It was messy too. Did you get that feel to it?
It put me in a bad mood for a long time too. I felt, I've since come around, and as I shared with you, I've express my feelings and my thoughts to you about where I think the whole thing stands. now, as far as the big picture goes, I'm in with it. But I mean, I'm a nobody. But it like put me in a bad mood because I'm like, oh, these fucking guys will be able to come back, and it was obvious to me, even though they had Adelaide, they had some few big tournaments and that kind of stuff. But I was getting inside scoop, internal live scoop that. It was dying on the vine, and nobody was getting any sponsors for these teams. And when we weren't interested in the teams, when we were so interested in the team event last year, and it just felt like it was dying on the vine. But it is what it is now.
There was some definite maneuvering going on, and I have to share the same sentiment as you, that when I first heard the news, there was shock, right? Then there was some anger. It was like, how could Jay, after everything that he said, like I called it out last year at the beginning of this podcast when all of this was going down, that Jay made several mistakes. One, bringing in the entire Saudi Arabia, 9/11, and all of those different, talking points to really try to bury this LIV Golf and bury it under the ground and make it go away. And I knew that was a mistake at the time. And that anger came from the things that he said that were so strong against LIV Golf and against the players who went over there. It was almost like they betrayed him. And now all of a sudden for him to go and turn his back on his players and to do this. And here's the thing. The reason I say that is because Johnson Wagner was in that meeting today. Or no, he wasn't in it. He was on they cut this from the Golf Channel's kind of their repetitiveness of Golf Central. But on the initial one, he talked about how he had one of his buddies that was a player in the meeting, put him on speakerphone so that he could listen in to the entire meeting. So that's how he was able to report on it. And they asked him, they're like, well, what would you say was the sentiment? How many people were for it versus against it? And he goes, it was 90-10. He's like, and he didn't hesitate. He's like, everybody for the most part was pissed. They were upset. He called that they were calling Jay a liar, a hypocrite. He went on to say that there were he applauded Jay for how he handled it. Because he said Jay just took it on the chin.
Took it like a man.
Took it like a man, knew that he had screwed up previously with some of the stuff that he had told the guys and everything.
But I will say this. I understand all those guys being pissed and that kind of stuff. But these decisions that are made by very highly educated, successful businessman, this is way above the pay grade of any PGA Tour. Now, every PGA Tour player is going to go in there that goes, oh, they're the suits and that kind of stuff. We're the ones carrying the clubs. Well, yeah, you're the best golfers in the world. And honestly, these guys are probably some of the best, they're the best businessmen in the world. And honestly, if I'll put it like this, and this might sound a little ridiculous, but if we're going to enter into a war, the United States against somebody, the president doesn't contact all of us to tell us as American citizens what we think or if we're going to vote on it or anything like that. When it comes to power and very important decisions with very successful people, I mean, yeah, democracy is great and that kind of stuff, and being transparent is great, but it doesn't happen that way in these unique situations, does it? You have to run these covert operations for obvious reasons of gossip getting out or news getting leaked and that kind of stuff. And this was obviously going on. Did you see Jeff Ogilvy's interview by any chance? Here's Australian Jeff Ogilvy, who is one of the, and I've said it before, one of the most uber intelligent guys and has a way with words and understanding things and is such a quick thinker on his feet, not for the right answers, but for an honest opinion from where he's staying from. But, he said, he basically said the same thing. And I loved his interview when he said that his theory was this thing, somebody found out about this thing and this thing was going to be leaked, right? And so they had to come out and full court press it and blindside everybody and not give them a heads up. And he gave examples when there's changes upcoming on the PGA Tour that they come in 2 or 3 meetings ahead of time and they lay the groundwork and tell them how great everything's going to be and how much money they're going to make. And it's for the big picture of the PGA Tour. And he said there was none of it, none of this.
None of that.
There was none of that. So obviously maybe there was a whistleblower or something got out and they really didn't have much of a choice but to do it the way they did it. And I have a million questions, you have a million questions. The Twitter bugs and and all the LIV people are like, they're having a field day. And yeah, it's 99 against 1 against Jay right now, but I have the sneaky suspicion that in the long run that this is probably the best decision he could make, but maybe it was the only decision he could make. And both you and I agree that, the big thing that stands out to me in all of these, there's a few things that stand out to me, but if you summarize what's going down and that kind of stuff, and I think you agreed with me, the fact is that the both sides wanted this lawsuit going bye-bye, because neither one of these countries/corporations wanted discovery opened on their financial dealings or their personal dealings or moralistic views or anything like that. More the Saudis on that, but for sure that had to play a big part in this whole deal. So what do we do? So we move forward. I have my own opinions on what I think is going to happen. I mean, the one thing that bothers me the most is, and I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I express my, I feel I'm just a caddy, but I still feel pissed that like these guys are going to, I don't think getting back to the PGA Tour is going to be an easy cut and dry process, that they're going to be welcome back, right? I think there's going to be strict stipulations, fines, discipline, and
well, it's going to be subjective too. That's the interesting thing that Jay, and what a lot of people are talking about is that they're kind of going to just pick the ones that they kind of want to allow back. And that's kind of the agreement with Yasir around it. And that part to it for me, I'm sitting there going, well, look at what Phil Mickelson said. So he's cheering, he's all excited and everything. He thinks he's back on the PGA Tour. You've got Pat Perez, who is your favorite guy, and he has talked so much shit, especially recently, about the PGA Tour. I can't see them coming back.
And honestly, his game, I don't even know how old the fat ass is now, but he's got to be 46ish or something like that. And I mean, really, he left for a reason, because he couldn't mix it up out here anymore. And he was making he was life and death to keep his card. So, we obviously the schedule stays the same at 2023, and we're going to get enlightened, I'm sure, on a daily basis about these changes. I'm sure there's going to be another they always seem to have huge player meetings at Hartford. So the week after the US Open, which is next week, 2 weeks, we're probably going to find out a lot more. But what does this do to guys like Chikara or Puig or Piot or these kind of guys? They never had status on the PGA Tour anyway. So for these guys to come back to the PGA Tour, it's got to be, guys that had some kind of status when they left, right? And I thought I heard on the Golf Channel that somebody broke a story that said, okay, let's say I'm using this as an example, an only example. I think it was Rich Lerner tapped into one of his resources, which he has quite a few resources. And he said he was talking to somebody. I think he said it was somebody that was high up in the financial world to LIV, and that the process is starting immediately how to let some of these guys back into the PGA Tour. Like it started today as soon as the news dropped. Then, as an example, he said, let's say Phil Mickelson got $200 million to play 3 years. Okay, so he got $100 million up front, right? And then he got 33.3 for the next 3 years. So the thing that this guy was telling Lerner was, okay, so he's got his 100, he got his 33, and if he wants to come back to the PGA Tour, he will be fined $66 million or something like that and suffer some disciplinary action. But
I heard the same, yeah.
Yeah, this is the biggest question mark to me. That and with the other guys, like where do they go? I think guys like that have to start all over again and work themselves up from the Korn Ferry Tour to get status, or they will stay on the Asian Tour or go to the DP World Tour and try and find an avenue there. But another thing that came to my mind is if they're going to let these certain amount of players in, we're going to have an influx of a lot of players in 2024, right? You have 30 guys coming from the Korn Ferry Tour. You have the top 10 on the DP Tour that are coming. You're going to have another 5 guys that are going to be able to get through Korn Ferry Tour Q School and go immediately to the tour. You already have the number 1 college player who's in the field at Canada who turned pro, Ludwig Auberg from Texas Tech. So it's like getting into these tournaments. To me, it really feels like Like my guy's number 71 on the list. He's like, and he's got a ton of talent. So he's going to be good. I feel very comfortable saying he's going to be fine for status next year and getting into a lot of events. But what about these guys that are playing in the fall from, let's say, 71 to 200? You know what I mean? If they fall out, what does this do for a guy like my ex-boss, Troy Merritt, who's struggling right now to make cuts, who was 140 something, maybe 150 on the FedEx Cup? Now, all of a sudden, we're going to have possibly too many players to fill all these fields. So there has to be a master plan that they've already thought about. I don't think they were just slinging shit against the wall, because great businessmen don't do that and then just roll with it on a daily basis.
Desperate ones do, Bobby.
What's that?
Desperate ones do, though.
Well, that's a very good point you brought up. Desperate ones do, for sure. But man, there's so much speculation. There's so many questions.
It just doesn't smell right to me. It doesn't pass the smell test. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, you're not going to hear this on the golf channels of the world. They have to kind of stay in their lanes, and they have to either be on one side or the other, and then they're going to talk about that.
It's
but
funny.
It doesn't smell right.
I'm listening to these golf channel guys, and I'll leave Brandel and Eamon Lynch out of it because they have their own issues, and this is a tough pill for them to swallow. But
they're not swallowing it. They're not going down easy.
They're not going to go down easy. But did you notice the whole, like, the Golf Central tonight was George Savaricas and who's the I met him.
Gosh, I'm terrible with names and remembering names. What the hell is his name?
I say the African American guy. That's so bad to say that.
Damon Hack.
Damon Hack, who probably can't crack 100, but he sounds pretty good on the Golf Channel and very educated and does his homework. But it's funny, I'm like, God, we're going through all these changes, and I was thinking to myself, here's my little hate thing. I'm like, God, we need a whole new fresh set of fucking. I like George Savaricas a lot, but I almost feel like if one part of the golf game is cleaning house, maybe we need to clean house with announcers too, because they just they sound absolutely ridiculous. And I will add this other point to Jay Monahan and company. These guys never make decisions that are bad for the game of golf. They only make decisions that is good for the game of the golf. And I'm not just saying it for their paychecks and that kind of stuff, but they are very important, very educated people that care about where golf is going. And they've always it always seems to me like they've made the right decisions, going back to Fincham. And I was just at the tail end of Fincham being around. And I told you before, I thought Jay Monahan was a breath of fresh air. And he's, man, when he took this job, he just couldn't imagine that things were going to happen the way they're going to happen. So he's going to be hated. But my personal opinion is he's going to be hated from a lot of these players for a long, long time. But I think maybe as time goes on, maybe people are going to realize that, man, this was the right decision, because me and you've been talking about it. It had to happen at some time. It was just a matter, and we've touched really ever since since Oak Hill at the PGA, how we put aside that I'm a caddy, that I'm a golf fan first and foremost, how we enjoyed having those 10 LIV players or 8 to 10 players that deserve to be there and were competitive in these majors. And now we're gonna see them in the long run. My own personal opinion is I think that this Governor Yassir, when he came in, and it's no coincidence that they shut Norman out completely from verbalizing anything this year, is, maybe these guys are such savvy businessmen that they knew that this shotgun start, and if this team thing didn't take off, that it would fail, and they would get a seat at the table, and they just got a big.
They're in control. He's going to be the chairman.
Well, with the merger, he's the new chairman. Jay's going to be obviously still be commissioner of
he's going to be underneath him. At the end of the day, Yassir's going to be in control.
But Yassir won't be in any control of PGA Tour or scheduling. The PGA Tour still holds the majority on the board when it comes to voting and that kind of stuff.
The PGA Tour, in terms of scheduling all that stuff, like, that's going to be business as usual, right? It's more about the control, and that's where I think the PGA Tour lost its way. Like, with Jay, they lost the leverage. And Rich Lerner was actually talking about this, that some of his sources told him that the PGA Tour was worried about their finances. That's the only thing that they could come up with.
Listen, that makes sense because you remember when COVID hit and no fans, no revenue, nothing like that for the sponsors. The PGA Tour were ponying up all this money out of their pocket. They increased all these to $20 million purses and everybody's like, where did the money come and that kind of stuff. But I think this was a business decision I'm not going to say on Jay's part, but on the PGA Tour's part. He just puts the final stamp of approval. He has a bunch of guys working under him, consultants that are very, very smart guys and very successful and smart guys.
But Bobby, you cannot say the things that Jay said last year.
Well, but
and
he
then
did.
recover from that. He did. But that's where he even commissioned.
You can't impeach a commissioner, first of all.
The 9/11 Families United.
I saw that.
They said that Jay commissioned them to go and strike and to go and be this loud figure within this battle. Well, you cannot go down that path and then justify anything you do in terms of making a deal with Saudi Arabia. And here's the thing. I have been on the side of saying that, the Uber example as to all the main investment into there. Like, I have no issues with this, by the way. So when it comes to me and the business side to this, makes complete sense. And we'll get into the business side a little bit later on. But for me, what Jay has said, and then to do this. Now, Jay did come out today and say that he was talking with the information that he had at the time. And I think we all want to know, well, what information do you have now?
Well, listen, in this whole thing, the last 2 years, since let's just call it 2 years, it's changed daily, right? The narrative and the information has had to change daily, and it moves so swift and so fluid that that's probably the reason why they had to do it so quick, is because somebody was going to leak it out and they had already had a plan. And hopefully we're going to find more of this plan as it goes along. But I'm just going to tell you from the big picture, to me, I'm just a caddy, as we all know, but I think Jay just got billions of dollars worth of capital. And I think Jay by agreeing to this, I think he just killed the LIV Tour too, which was a big thing for everybody else, because I don't think the LIV Tour is going to keep going after this year.
I think you're wrong, because the only reason why LIV didn't succeed. Let's go with a penny bet, a 1 year penny bet. If they go under by 2025, then I will owe you 1,000 pennies. How about that? And if they don't, you owe me 1,000 pennies. So
I hope I'm still alive to.
I hope I am too.
Off them like that, because I will always be in the hole, I'm sure. But I never have to pay until I get to 10,000. So, anyways,
I don't know if this is, how do I put this? LIV Golf is going to survive, because the thing that was really strangling them and kind of sucking them dry was that the PIF fund, or the PIF, they kept putting money into this, losing and not making any money from LIV Golf. I mean, they're so far in the hole on this that it'd almost be impossible for them over the next 5 to 10 years to get out of that hole. But part of that was because the PGA Tour strong-armed a lot of the sponsors, and so they were sucked dry. They were not allowed to. So Ari Emanuel from Endeavor, right? Big organization, said Jay asked him not to do business. They were going to invest into LIV Golf.
I read that last week.
They didn't, because of Jay and because of their relationships with the PGA Tour.
Yeah, he's the Workday. He's the head honcho at Workday, right? But you can
Endeavor. So that's the agency. Yeah. That's the big sports agent. So IMG and Endeavor, or WMG, when they merged, they became Endeavor, and so he's the head of it all. Gotcha. And so they were going to dump billions into LIV Golf. And again, they didn't, because Jay asked them not to. So now the floodgates are open. Now you're going to see sponsors come in. There's going to be the ability for owners now not to be ashamed and have their name dragged through the mud if they own a franchise.
That shit is not going to go. My take is, takes all speculation, just like yours. That's not going to go into LIV Golf. That's going to go into the new merger of the three of them together. That's where all these sponsors are. And you forgot to add to everybody that, they're losing their ass. They have fucking unlimited money. Gas. What did I just read? That they're cutting down exporting oil to 1 million or something in the near future in July. So the rumor around the campfire is that our gas prices are going to shoot up again next month. So I don't think they ever cared about losing all the money per se. I'm sure they weren't happy about it, but I think it was a small price to pay for today.
I think they were smart in the negotiations and really sucking the PGA Tour dry when it comes to all the legal expenses and everything, because who could afford legal battles ongoing? Obviously, Saudi Arabia and this PIF fund, right? So
keep continuing. They could have kept continuous this thing to 2024, 2025, and it's attorneys are paid. The
attorneys were winning big. They got to be pissed right now.
Who cares if Liv's the loser or PGA Tour is the big loser in this? There's not going to be any loser in the PGA Tour. They're going to be around forever, right? They just have more capital now. They're obviously pissed some people off, but the attorneys are the big losers, right? They're missing out on millions of dollars of at least of attorney's fees. So we'll see how it goes. I think this is going to be a winning scenario in bloom right now, and hopefully Jay survives, because everybody likes Jay. Like I said,
I don't know if he's that liked anymore, Bobby.
Well, amongst the players, no, but I mean, my whole point was they play. They play golf for a living. Jeff Ogilvy said it best. He goes, "Oh my God,
these guys are going to turn on you, Bobby."
Well, I mean, none of them listen, so it doesn't really matter. None of them fucking.
That was the best line of the night so far.
By now, if anybody would have listened, or if anybody figured out my burner Twitter account, nobody knows. But I'm entitled to my own opinion. But basically, you got a bunch of fucking 175. You got a bunch of guys with some big egos who felt like they were caddies left out and not being clued in on the situation. Everybody, I hate to say it, was probably a little bit butthurt, but like I said, if we go to war with Russia tomorrow, President Biden is not going to call every American citizen and ask for a head count or a vote. They're going to make a decision behind doors, and they're going to commit to their decision, and they're going to stick to what they think is the best decision for our country, and in this situation, what's best for the PGA Tour. So I spoke at my piece. I think everything is going to be fine in the long run. I hope Jay makes it through that. I know guys are wanting him out, and we call him a hypocrite. And, he deserves, with all the things going forward, he probably deserves all of that. And he's going to take that like a man, because the fact is the man in power, as I've always said with the presidency, half the people are going to like you and half the people are going to hate you, right? And if a certain amount of people hate you, you've probably done a pretty good fucking job.
Well, you got to do what's going to benefit the PGA Tour the most, right? And to bring in billions of dollars to end all the money going out. And now let's get into the business side of it, right? So from a business perspective, this makes a ton of sense. This is what I've been calling for the entire time, to where I really wanted to see these two organizations come together. And technically 3 with the DP World Tour, but they kind of feel like the redheaded stepchild right now. That being said, LIV Golf is going to survive, in my opinion, Bobby. They're going to get those corporate sponsors now. And I found it interesting. And the reason why I say that is because in the press release and within the conversation on CNBC and so forth, they forced Jay's hand to say that they're going to support team golf moving forward.
Yeah, but
that to me, but why even call that out? Why call that out if you're not going to have LIV Golf around?
Maybe that's going to come to the PGA Tour. I mean, you certainly aren't going to have a team golf aspect in any of the majors. That's never going to happen. That's just, I'm sorry. They are special. They are sacred. That's never going to happen.
Agreed with that.
Brewing up. So maybe they're brewing up something that there's going to be a team, there's going to be some kind of team event or something like that in what let's just call them regular tour events, a John Deere or a Detroit or something like that. But you're not going to see a team aspect come to, hey, I think these Saudis got great business ideas. I mean, they're in F1, they're in tennis, they're in basically everything.
They're in soccer.
They're in soccer, they're in chess, for Christ's sake. They're in everything. And they are getting a quick start to controlling sports in the world, honestly.
There's going to be a case study done on this. As far as how great of a business move it was and the maneuvers that LIV Golf used in order to force this.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if there were any maneuvers, as far as the fact is that maybe their live was dying on the vine, but it put the PGA Tour in such a bad financial thing that they just like, that was their ace. That was their pocket aces, right? They always had the pocket aces, and everybody was chasing and chasing and chasing, and wasn't checking, so to speak, in a poker game. And
that might be the best analogy I've heard all day today. Is that
pocket aces?
The pocket aces, because they had the pocket aces because they could afford to continue this litigation ongoing.
They can afford whatever they want. So we agree to disagree. I say live is dead, and I say live is definitely dead in the water now.
My range goats, don't destroy my range goats.
Who gives a fuck about the high flyers or the smash or
the cliques
or whatever?
Oh, did you see Homa's tweet? Oh, Homa's tweet was brilliant.
No, you mean Joel Damon's tweet? No, it was about the
was it Joel? No. No, Joel Damon did one on the aces, and then I saw one from Max Homa. I forgot to add it to our stories for Pole Hook Golf, but he goes, now that we're all friends, can somebody tell me what a clique is? The clique's golf club.
Joel Damon's was great. Joel Damon's was great too. He's like, I've grown up idolizing the aces, the four aces, or whatever they're called. Maybe I can play on their team sometime. Which leads me to believe that maybe even a guy like Joel Damon says that this team aspect. Listen, the team aspect was dying on LIV, but with billions of dollars, if you bring the team aspect somehow to the PGA Tour, Matt, you can make it work, because the PGA Tour has the sponsors, and they have the TV deals, and they have the viewers, and this could turn into a little F1 scenario.
But do you think they're going to break up, or that they're going to combine all three into one? Like, I know they're going to name the entity that's going to be the owner of those three, but I kind of see it as PGA Tour is going to be the PGA Tour, DP World Tour is going to be the DP World Tour, and then LIV Golf's going to remain as LIV Golf. Like, that's how I see it broken out.
What I think too is maybe some of these, maybe there's certain events that these bigger LIV players can come back and play in. I don't know. I really don't know, but I can also see the LIV Tour going to, I wouldn't compare it to the Corn Ferry Tour, but I could see the LIV Tour as an avenue now to get to the PGA Tour with this new merger, right? Maybe there's certain events on the LIV Tour that Dustin, and they'll whack the team thing, that Dustin and the big guys will play in. And then maybe there's certain amount of events that they're going to play on the PGA Tour. So I don't fucking know. I know nothing. Nobody knows anything. There's maybe 5 to 7 guys that know what's really fucking going on, and it's driving you crazy, and it's driving me crazy. And
I'm glad you said that, because it is driving me nuts. I hate that there's no details.
What are all these LIV Golf latest Twitter guys going to do for a living now if LIV goes bye-bye?
Well, that is a good point. And they're all celebrating like they just won the World Series.
This is not good for them. This is not good for them at all. A merger was inevitable. We can sit back and say a merger was inevitable and should have been done in the first place, right? But we're all human beings, right? And this is uncharted territory. Nobody's experienced this before. There's no documentation on, like, if you're in a federal court or something like that, where you go, well, Roe versus Wade or whatever, you can go back to other cases and use that as a guideline. There's no guidelines here. You just got to, I feel like everybody's rolling with the punches, so to speak. So
I do wonder, with Yasir becoming the chairman, I do wonder if this is leverage. Like, who won this? That's what I want to know. Who won these negotiations? Like, is there a deal between him and Jay to where, okay, you might be right, LIV Golf is going to go away, PGA Tour will bring back in some of the players they want to, will there be a team style of a series that goes on under PGA Tour branding? Like, these are the answers I want to know, because for Yasir to be put in the chairman spot, if this was equal in terms of the negotiations back and forth, like if one side didn't think that they had the upper hand on the other, which I think Yasir knew that they had the upper hand, I don't know why they would have given him the chairman spot, because that's a big deal. That right there, because the chairman's going to be in control of this entire thing, of the entire 3 entities that exist. Yeah. And for me, what was the give and take? What did he sacrifice in order to have that spot? What did Jay get for that? So
maybe just maybe Jay in return got the fact that the PGA Tour and the PGA Tour alone will decide how these guys can come back to play in the PGA Tour. Maybe that was something that Jay was getting out of
I would hope he got more than that.
Well, I would hope too, but the fact is because he's, I'm sure there's thousands of pages of documents that are going to be drawn up here shortly, that even though he's chairman or Jay's CEO or something like that, there could be restrictions on power or something like that. I don't know. I hate to quote Jeff Ogilvy again, but I love quoting Jeff Ogilvy because he's one of my favorite people in the world, but this is way above my pay grade, man. This is way above my pay grade. And Jeff Ogilvy said it best at the end of his interview. He goes, really, we hit a white ball around in grass fields. We don't have it very bad. I don't know. He was basically saying, I don't know why everybody's upset. That's
why I hated the media jumping on the LIV Golf players when this all went down initially and literally just scrutinizing them, turning it into a moral decision to join LIV Golf and everything. It's like, no, they're taking care of their families. They're going out, they're getting the money that they want. And that's why I do agree with that, because now all of a sudden, like, that 9/11 Families United group, like, they've already said, like, how are the players going to, be a part of this and everything? Like, that's up to them. And it's just like, now it's coming back to the players, but the players are just hitting a little golf ball around. They're just playing a game of life out there. Golf is a game of life.
Yeah. And they've been compensated quite well. It's funny. I was trying to get a hold of our guy, Jimmy, James Hahn, he's up there.
He did not look happy walking out of that meeting today. I'll tell you that much.
Number one, James is not happy because James is no longer on the pack board, and he had a lot of great ideas, and he got self-admittedly got pushed. Jordan. Nobody wanted to hear from James Hahn. Everybody wanted to hear from Jordan Spieth or other guys. And I feel like Peter Malnati's in James's position now too, where he didn't even attend the meeting. Right?
That was a big deal. Him and Tommy Fleetwood did not go to that meeting.
Yeah, well, Fleetwood's not on the pack, but Malnati's on the pack, and he's
the head of it.
He is. Well, Rory's the head of the pack. James is just the.
I thought James Malnati was.
No, he's not the head of the pack. No, he's just a member of the pack. I believe Rory is the head of the pack, and Peter is the one that the players vote on. The players representative on the pack. If that makes any sense. Hahn was trying to explain the situation to me, and I do know that when you are in that position, like James was in that position, I do know this, and I love Peter Malnati because he's the best guy on the planet. But I do know that he was. He was trying to get votes from other players to be in this position. So my point is if you're putting on the squeeze and calling in markers, hey, I'm the best for the job and that kind of stuff, go to the fucking meeting. But you do know that there was another PAC meeting shortly after that at 6 p.m., right? And we haven't heard. I keep putting on. It's a beautiful night for me on Twitter right now because it just refreshes every 6 seconds. There's like more and more shit. I mean, 9 out of the 10 things that come on Twitter are things that we already know, but I keep diving in and to try and get a little bit of more information or a little bit more information, which I know nothing's going to come out tonight. But like I told you, I feel like there'll be a huge meeting at Hartford, and we'll have some more. I don't think they'll have a meeting at the U.S. Open because, obviously yesterday was the longest day in golf with all the qualifiers and everything like that. But that's a USGA run tournament, obviously, and they're not going to have the manpower there, player wise, like they will in a 156 man field designated event for another 20 million in Hartford. So, man, just a lot of speculation and a lot of questions that you have your theory. I have my theory. 10,000 people could be in this room and you could get 10,000 different theories on what's happening, but we don't fucking know. We really don't know.
We don't because there's no details yet. Yeah, I mean, the one detail that was pretty interesting to me though, is the fact that the PGA Tour is going to remain a nonprofit. Okay. Yeah. And this new entity is going to be for profit. For sure. I have no idea. It's above it, Bobby. It's above even mine. Because I'm like, hang on, how can the main entity be a for-profit organization? And then you've got a nonprofit underneath you. Like, how does that all make sense? But I guess if the PGA Tour just remains, well, that goes to my point too, around the fact that they're going to keep all three of these entities separate. They're going to keep the PGA Tour separate, DP World Tour, and then LIV Golf. But again, who knows if LIV Golf is going to survive or not? The one thing that we have not talked about yet is one of your favorite topics, which is Greg Norman. What the fuck is going to happen to Greg Norman?
He's gone. He didn't
even know.
Already reporting that he is not. Let me say this: the only chance that Norman has of staying around is if LIV keeps gelling, keeps moving, because I think it's one of the stipulations in there that when these negotiations started, maybe even Governor Yassir, when Jay and him met in London, that Jay's like, we need to work together, and Yassir's like, we need to work together. Maybe they shut Greg up for a reason this year, because they were not happy with his loud mouth and his hard on, so to speak, for the PGA Tour. So Greg ain't going anywhere near the PGA Tour or this little, let's call it the trifecta of these three corporations coming together. His only chance, I thought I heard that Bob Harig was already reporting that there is no position for Greg Norman in this new merger. And honestly,
Bob Harig. I was trying to think of who you were talking about.
Yeah, the popular guy, and he usually gets some good. He's like Adam Schefter of the NFL, right? He gets some good.
He gets some good scoops.
So Norman would have been fucking popping off left and right today. What a great victory it was.
He did.
He one tiny little 2-sentence thing that was probably fucking scripted because they put the cuffs on him. What a nice scenario.
But he didn't know. He didn't know about this deal.
Scenario for Mark King to come in now. Think about that.
If that happens. This whole deal has been going on for longer than we think, than the 7 weeks that was reported and all of that stuff. Because Mark King has been in the kind of the wings. We reported that early on, and it didn't come to fruition as of yet. But maybe there was a reason why it hadn't come to fruition yet. Well, that's a really good point, Bobby.
Well, it could. It's that's trying to make me throwing shit that could stick on the wall. But the fact is that I really think that speculation is a big word tonight. But my big thing is that I really think that Jay went to Yassir and said, "Hey, listen, we need, this is, if we're going to come together, we got to come together as savvy businessman. We can't have it done Greg Norman's way for the hard on he has for this tour. We can, we can move golf. This was never about growing the game to Greg or to all those other players, Poulter and Westwood and whoever said they were growing to the game. When one of their own teammates, Harold Varner, completely called him out and said it was a crock of shit once he played one tournament there. So this was probably going on for a while where they were trying to get this thing together. With Greg didn't even fucking know.
I know. That was shocking.
He has no role with them anymore.
But Bobby, is there a world? I gotta ask you this question: is there a world that Jay Monahan accepts this deal and Greg Norman stays in place?
No.
I don't think so either.
No,
we don't know yet.
We don't know, but I would bet, man. I bet your last dollar on that. I'm
not betting that.
He's not. He's shut down and shut out for a reason. And maybe the Yassir guy fired right back to Jay and goes, we're not really happy with him, right? Let's see if we can hash something out. It could end up being win-win.
That could have been the icebreaker to that entire phone call.
It could have been a win-win situation. And I like how they described their meeting where they met in London, they had lunch, they played some golf, they had lunch again. So these guys are, there wasn't 50 people in their ear or anything like that. It was these two grown, successful men talking about how they can make this work together without Greg Norman. I guarantee you that was a big thing, was to get Norman out of there. So
it has to be for Jay to be able to save face with the players. I have to think that was one stipulation, and then the path back to the PGA Tour would be very subjective around the players that they actually want back, like DJ Brooks.
Yeah, but think about all the other LIV players that were promised world rankings and were promised all these things from Greg that were complete lies. They can't suspend you from the tour, right? We all saw the text, the text from Sergio to Greg that somebody got. World rankings, you're going to be able to play in this. They can't do that. There's no way they can legally do it. Well, they fucking did it. and I just don't think it's any coincidence that you haven't fucking heard a word from Greg all year other than congratulations or big deal. But for the so-called face of the LIV Tour, if it was even his idea, I believe that this was Piff's idea all along, that they brainstormed this LIV Golf League and they just got Greg to come in with his heart on and used it to their advantage to get where they wanted to go, to get a nice foothold into another major sport.
I mean, not that, Bobby. They literally, now they're in charge. I mean, they've taken over.
Didn't even know. The supposed face of fucking LIV Golf didn't even know. So he's fucking nobody's having maybe Jay's having a rough day. Bless you. Maybe Jay's having a super rough day, understandably. But I think possibly Greg Norman's even having a rougher day.
What about Rory McIlroy, who got thrusted by Jay? Yeah. Thank goodness Justin Thomas decided, you know what, I'm going to bail on being the face of this thing. And then it became Rory McIlroy who had to come out.
Like you said, your theory, why did he get so quiet after the Masters and that kind of stuff? And if only 5 to 7 people knew about it, is there a chance that Rory saw this coming or was in some kind of private meetings with the PGA Tour where he wasn't told this, but possibly he put 2 and 2 together to get 4 and saw the writing on the wall and decided to take a step back? But he's Rory. He's a great guy. He's a smart guy. He's a generational talent. He's one of the greatest to ever play the game, even if he's never won a Masters, and I think he's loaded up the ass. I think this is going to roll off his, this has to roll off his back.
I think it will too.
It has to roll off his back. I do know that I was reading that he spoke to a lot of players personally after the meeting, so they could voice through him, their grumblings and that kind of stuff. Man, I'm the only one that I think that these players shouldn't have walked into that meeting with a noose. They should have sit down there and listened to what Jay had to say, and then they can fire, and then they can fire.
I just think when you're sold a rhetoric that if you go over there, you're evil, you're bad, you're a terrible human being. Yeah. And then all of a sudden that same guy who told you not to do it because you would be a terrible person, all of a sudden flips the script on you and all of a sudden agrees to a deal with them. That's a tough pill for some of these guys to swallow. Well, and yes, it's short term, nearsighted, that it's not going to benefit them, but it is.
It's the tougher pill for the 6 to 10 of them that turn down whopping big contracts, right? It's not a tough pill to swallow for Wesley Bryant or Scott Stallings or Dylan Wu or, you could, or 80% of that room that
well, you saw what Wesley Bryant said, right?
I did, but listen, I love Wesley to death, but he's an attention seeker too, honestly. I mean, I would say it to his face. Maybe I wouldn't, but he's kind of fucking, it's kind of one of those, what's the word I'm looking for? Not manic depressive, something that's up and down all the time. You never know what you're going to get when you see him, what kind of mood he's in, but he's,
oh gosh, that's funny. He was a trick shot artist to begin with his brother before he got on tour.
I mean, that is, I've seen his shit. That's fucking impressive. And he was a great golfer and he won Hilton Head and that kind of stuff, but he'll even tell you himself, it's easier for him to get into PGA Tour starts with his tiny status than his is. He even said, when on record, he's like, I can't even get in a Corn Ferry Tour event, But my point is, it's a bitter pill to swallow for the guys that turn down contracts, especially if some of these guys who got guaranteed contracts are going to be able to come back and play, which it sounds like there's a process going on as we speak to let the door open. And I'm sure that they are not going to be welcomed with open arms, to tell you the truth. I would be shocked to see if Pat Perez came back on this tour. I would be absolutely fucking shocked.
After what he said.
And then the way all the guys that I see on the driving range, forget my personal issues with him, but he can fool a Keith Mitchell or 2 or 3 people into thinking that he's a great guy and that kind of stuff. But 97% of the guys out there that know what a phony piece of shit that he really is, and so somebody like that is probably not going to be welcomed back with open arms. A guy like Dustin or Brooks or Cam Smith, fuck yeah,
we want them,
bro. I told you, bro, last year at the FedEx Cup in Memphis, I go, it wasn't the same without it, or even Bryson. You got to throw Bryson in there. It wasn't the same without those 3 or 4 or 5 big guys. The electricity wasn't wasn't the same. Hey, no disrespect to guys that are winning these golf tournaments out here and that kind of stuff, but you got, Memorial, I'll use it as an example. And David Lipsky's one of my best friends, but people don't, David Lipsky doesn't sell tickets.
No.
That
was the problem with LIV Golf earlier this year.
They sell those names I just mentioned, sell tickets. And you go to another level. Siwoo Kim now all of a sudden, he's getting a little cult following. He sells a few tickets. Sungjae doesn't sell tickets. Nobody buys a ticket and says, unless you're Korean, says, I'm going to go watch Sungjae. But the 5 guys that I mentioned that are missing are the guys that they fucking sell all the tickets, and our leaderboards.
They do. They're the big names that the PGA Tour built up.
Our leaderboards have not been the same since those guys have left. Thank God for Scotty and thank God for John, and a little bit thank God for Rory's drama, because that's been keeping things going and keeping us, the PGA Tour was always going to be fine. Was LIV always going to be fine? Well, we won't know to the future, but we do. I'll be the first one to say that it took me a while to get over it, but we miss those guys. And with me and my position and my job, I miss those guys, and I miss that electricity and those guys being in the fields. And I can tell you they weren't competitive anymore. I mean, Dustin wasn't the same Dustin. Brooks was obviously injured. Cam was at the top of his game when he left, but as far as
Bryson was injured.
I mean, yeah, well, you fucking never know if he's injured or not. I think he's half fucking full of shit. I mean, the buffed out Bryson, and now he's slimmed down, and he made a nice run at Oak Hill. I mean, it's a golf course that sets up for him quite nicely. I mean,
Bryson's changing more than a bipolar person.
Listen, I've been in a million money games with Phil over the years, right? And I've got to know him pretty good. But there's just something about Phil, and I'll say it honestly, that is fucking sketchy, right? There's just something that's a little bit sketchy about Phil. But the fact is people buy fucking a lot of tickets to come watch one of the greatest golfers to ever play the game, Phil Mickelson, because
with one of the greatest short games. You're going to see the flop shots.
Doesn't matter if he beats one player in fucking Tulsa or wherever they played and he was 9 over par. He brings it every single day, and he's trying to get better, and he is genuinely trying out there 110%. But I've been in those money games with him before. Did you read the thing where somebody fired at him and he's like, he's like, oh, I haven't gambled in years or something like that. And Colton Nose fired in. He goes, oh, can I get that 10 grand back or something like that? So anybody that's been involved in a money game, or any member at the farms or anything, knows that Phil is like you and I were when we were a freshman in fucking high school trying out for the high school golf team. Let's play for $5 or something like that. It's a disease for some people. I know it's a disease because I went through the gambling disease. It is a disease that a pill doesn't cure, that only the person themselves with a lot of help and a lot of support can cure themselves, really, to tell you the truth. So, those guys, I'll just summarize by saying those guys are missed. I hope this process brings them back to an extent, but not to an extent where, there's going to be 100 guys on the range that don't want to fucking see him and that kind of stuff. And with that being said, there were 100 guys on the range that didn't want to see any LIV guys either until they all showed up at Augusta, right? And then everybody, I don't think it's any coincidence that everybody was cool to the guys that never went overboard on their choice, Brooks Koepka or Dustin Johnson or Cam Smith, where they just took the fucking high road. Yep. And they just said, I couldn't pass the money up. I could not pass up the money. I couldn't pass up the fucking money. So you respect that, right? You respect that. And those guys were welcomed with open arms. It's the phony guys like Poulter. I think Poulter's a phony fuck, to tell you the truth, and I could go down the whole list and I just,
So remember when Mito was going over to LIV Golf?
Yeah.
And that was going to be at the beginning of the year and everything. Well, one of the ping guys actually told me, he's like, the sentiment from him and his agent and everybody is that everything's going to merge at some point. Yeah. And that's why might as well take the money now.
Yeah.
Because he's an up and comer and so forth. So might as well take it. And then once it merges, he's back on the PGA Tour. Well, that was their sentiment.
It looks like he had good coaching there, right? It looks like I think he's a Wasserman guy. Those Wasserman guys are good agents. I think he probably
Wasserman is a pretty good agency.
Yeah, tell me about it. They're a powerhouse, but he got some good advice from his guy. And a guy like, man, a guy like Mito doesn't really sell tickets only to Latinos or something like that, but he has a place in golf, right? He has a place in golf after Southern Hills, right? People didn't know who Mito Pereira was, honestly, until the 72nd hole. You and I knew who he was because I'm on the ground floor all the time, and you follow it left and right. So we knew who he was, and we talk about the up and coming talents, all the sleepers, so to speak, that nobody knows about, right? But nobody knew about him until after the 72nd hole at Southern Hills. But he's got a place on the PGA Tour, and he's got a place in majors. And I believe Taylor Gooch is kind of on the cusp of that. He's in that top 50, top 60.
I think so, especially after he's won 2 LIV Golf events back to back.
2 LIV Golf events. Part of me doesn't think Harold, does Harold Varner sell tickets?
I think he does. No. I think he does.
Where, fucking Hilton Head?
I think he in North Carolina for sure.
Charlotte too. Yeah. So he sells a few tickets, but I guarantee you the majority of people aren't waking up in the morning and they're looking at the field and they go, Harold Varner's in the field. Maybe the guys from North Carolina. There's a handful of them.
Well, you got Eastside Golf behind Harold too, so you've got a bit of a movement there.
Unfortunately, as fucked up as our race deal is in this country, for sure that he does. I'm not saying he doesn't have a popular feeling. And I told you I have all the respect for him after he won. And the one quote that I'm going to say for the last time, the one quote he goes, 20 years from now, no, he's going to remember that I won this LIV Golf event for $4 million. But what I do with the money, people are going to remember for a lifetime, and families are going to remember for a lifetime. And that's a man right there that says stuff like that.
I completely agree. Bobby,
what else?
What is for you?
Yeah.
The worst thing that happened from this, and then what's the best thing that you think is going to happen from this?
Okay, so I'll say the worst thing that happened from this is the fact that some of these players are going to be able to come back. That is the worst thing, and that's very vague. And I'm not just talking about Fat Ass himself, but I feel like I feel like they could bring a toxic "I told you so" to the driving range on certain things. Like you could see a guy like Perez, because you can say that the PGA Tour brass works for the players. Of course you could say that. But the fact is the guys who run the PGA Tour are much smarter than 99.9% of the golfers when it comes to making decisions. But the worst thing to happen to me is some of these people that could possibly come back, that's going to make it toxic and uncomfortable for everybody on the driving range, and still shit on the PGA Tour with an "I told you so" attitude. The best thing to happen to this, I guess I can put in like 2 categories. Easy number 1 is the fucking money, right? Because now we could be playing for 20 million. We're going to finish out this 2023. We'll see how they tweak the schedule. But man, if we have that money behind us, we could just inherit those $20 million LIV purses every single fucking event. And we already, my guy just finished tied for 41st and made $70,000 for tied for 41st. That's usually about 20-some thousand, 26 to 28,000 on the PGA Tour, depending how many people made the cut. So it's an easy for me is the money that it's going to bring into the game, and the opportunity for me. I'm 1 month away from turning 59 years old. Okay. So really, realistically, how much time and how much luck do I need to get enough money to make sure that my family is going to be taken care of if something physically happened to me, or if I got sick or something like me? And I mean, there's obviously life insurance and that kind of stuff if something did happen to me. So number 1 is the financial opportunities, for me. And I would say, a very small number 2 in that category would be the excitement that comes back with possibly Dustin and Brooks and Cam Smith and Bryson DeChambeau. And I'm sure I'm leaving a few guys out of there that fit into that category, but it's no coincidence to me that guys like, and I'll say it, I'm going to use a few names that I could be right or I could be wrong. Bernd Wiesberger, Abe Answer, Carlos Ortiz, Joaquin Niemann. I mean, those guys were like really, really good players. Wiesberger might not have been as good as those kind of guys, but he was still a world-class, top 50 in the world player. before they got the big check in their bank, right? So I think when they got the big check in their bank, they're like, yeah, I'll go out and practice, but am I practicing with a purpose now compared to if I knew that I had to practice on the PGA Tour to be competitive? And I'm not disrespecting the talent level at LIV, but the talent level from 1 to 144 on the PGA Tour is much stronger than the talent level from 1 to Siwon Kim Land, number 48 on the PGA Tour, right? Does that make any sense to you? So those would be my one negative, would be somebody, a few guys coming in and adding an uncomfortable, toxic, shit-talking element to a golf tournament. And my biggest pro would be the fucking cash.
I am right with you with the cash, right? But my big takeaway, and the big thing that I think is going to come from this, because Yasir alluded to this in their CNBC interview, is that he's going to turn this into a major sport like basketball, baseball, and some of the other big American sports. And what I took from that was that they're going to pay salaries. Now, the downside that could come from this is that there's going to be a smaller group of guys that are technically the PGA Tour. That it's not going to be 150, 200 guys having access to get into tournaments and so forth. But one of the other things that I hope, so we have the big takeaway, which is salaries, I think, are coming.
Okay.
The second part is that the downside to it is might downsize a bit in terms of the number of players.
Yeah.
And then the last piece is that what I hope takes place is that the Korn Ferry Tour and beyond is building up of this talent and giving them maybe smaller contracts, but allowing them to have a life as they work on their craft and on their game in order to move up to the other levels and having that ability to move up. That's where I think that is what I hope for if they do end up having a bit of a downsize. But I do think, Bobby, for especially a guy like S.H. Kim and so forth, I think salaries are coming. I think changes to how caddies are going to be treated might happen because of how they're treated on the LIV Golf.
There's a couple things. I mean, I agree with that. You know, we do technically get salaries, a couple thousand a week,
but those are dependent on your player.
Well, it is. I mean, that's a generalization. I mean, no caddy is out there working for a straight percentage. You know what I mean? No caddy is going to take a shot on, hey, I'll give you a straight 10% if you don't take a salary. That's never going to happen, and especially what if something like that happened and you put yourself in my shoes for a couple months when Troy seemed to have lost his game for a little while. I mean, you're losing thousands and thousands of dollars. I mean, it would be nice for us to get something more than a $7,500 health insurance benefit and some kind of retirement program and that kind of stuff, because I do feel like we are, I know we're independent contractors. I know the players are independent contractors, but it would be nice for somebody to think of us in that way as far as retirement goes, because, you get a guy like me who's been lucky and had some success, but unfortunately I started this job so late that, I don't drink anymore. I don't fuck around. I do anything. I take good care of myself. But the fact is that, father time is coming and you cannot postpone father time. So for a guy like me, and I'm not the only one out there, there is a sense of urgency, right, to make some money and to make some money fast. So I think there's going to be a lot of good things that come out of this. There's always with anything good, there's something bad, and that's why maybe
people don't like change.
People don't like change. No, they don't, but they can get used to it after a while, right? If it succeeds. And that's, I think, why I have a little soft spot in my heart for Jay Monahan's position, because when you are the leader of that, you have to go into these meetings and sometimes you have to deliver good news, right? And sometimes you have to deliver bad news. And that's really like successful leaders are so highly compensated, because they're the guys that can do that and they can take that and it comes down to what's best for business. So we'll see. Don't you feel like we need to have like emergency pod possibly every night for the next 2 weeks, whether it's
we might need
when
to,
something
Bobby.
comes up, it's like emergency golf pod.
We might have to all of a sudden jack up from 65 episodes to 100 over these next couple of weeks.
Every one of our podcast competitors, and we don't compete against other podcasts. This was your brainchild. This was your idea. We've never talked about getting rich doing this. We just have a lot of fun together, don't we? And
we really do.
If something comes down the road where it's compensation in 2 or 3 years, that would just be a bonus. It's almost like caddying, where it's like you don't expect to get anything, but when it happens, it feels really good. But all these other podcasts, they're all fucking emergency podcasts. Smiley Kaufman's like, I got to have an emergency podcast, and he's like, and Smiley Kaufman's like, from a player's point of view, and he's talking shit and that kind of stuff, and I'm thinking. First thing I'm thinking to myself is, I'm like, I would fucking zip it if I was you, because you may work for NBC or ABC or the Golf Channel and do these things and that kind of stuff, but I think Uncle Jay's got power with those TV contracts, and he could probably make a phone call to somebody and say, I didn't like the way this sounded or something like that. And it's not like, let's just say it, Smiley Kaufman's like an A+ announcer or anything like that. So some of these guys that are popping off and it's not like he's a player anymore, or he made 150 cuts and he's fully vested. He totally lost his game. But I just think it's funny, and I chuckle to myself when all these guys get so opinionated, when I feel like, man, this guy's not being fucking smart. He should just keep his opinions to his wife or his close friends and that kind of stuff.
You say that, and what's hilarious is I was going to end this with the fact that I have to applaud. And after all the shit that I've given Jay Monahan, from making mistakes and calling it out about him tying things to 9/11 and the entire moral compass to this, and I said that was a mistake at the time, and he had to basically, like, in his position, he was in a lose-lose position, having to make this decision. And I give him fucking credit, Bobby, because he's got some balls on him after everything that he said to make this move, because this was the best move for the PGA Tour and honestly for the game of golf. And that's going to be something that, as long as the Saudis continue it, but they haven't tried to screw over F1. They haven't tried to screw over a soccer club. They haven't tried to do any of this. Like, I get the whole sport washing commentary around it and everything to change their reputation. But at the end of the day, they're smart business guys that they are doing what's best for the game of golf. And I think by putting billions of dollars into the pocket of the PGA Tour in order to do more with the game of golf is ultimately going to be a good thing. So I do hope that Jay makes it through this and doesn't have to resign, and that players, I mean, the one thing we didn't end up talking about tonight, we'll get into this in maybe an emergency pod, is the fact of, do the players now all of a sudden create a players union? Is this something that ends up coming from this?
There's going to be a lot of questions, and I'm sure something like that is going to be discussed. And I feel like a players union being discussed will be at its height right now tonight, right? And I feel like every day after, until there's some light is being shed on the whole process here and the end goal, so to speak, I think there'll be fewer and fewer guys that want to do something like that. And I've already made my opinion on what happens behind closed doors from leaders.
And I agree with you
on something like that. But I was going to say this: do you think Jay Monahan's been sleeping much the last weeks?
Absolutely not. He knew this was coming.
This guy, how do you listen? I know how I just carry a fucking golf bag for a living, but I know how my mind works during a tournament week and that kind of stuff. And the things that I can bring home to my bed, to my hotel room at night, when I had whether I had a good day or whether I had a bad day, your mind works and that kind of stuff. So, and it's tough we had an old time caddy out here. His name's Cubby. He used to work for Davis Love. He was kind of a legend. Remember I told you a story at Hartford, which is coming up. He was working for Brad Faxon back in the day, and he went to Forkhead in the last hole. They were tied for 70th or something like that. And Faxon hit the low snap hook and it hit him in the back, and he got a 2-stroke penalty. And so that's Cubby. So Cubby used to always tell me I would stay with him sometimes, and I would, he was like a mentor to me, it's funny to say that a 45 or 48-year-old would have a mentor, but at that stage of the game, me caddying late, I mean, a mentor, and we would talk about things and, and I would ramble off and tell him, he's like, how'd you sleep? And I'm like, oh, fuck, I couldn't I couldn't stop thinking about this or couldn't think about that. And he just looked at me one night and he goes, K-fuck radio. And I go, what? He goes, K-fuck radio is so hard to turn off sometimes. And it made perfect sense to me, right? It's K-fuck radio that is going in your head. So maybe an emergency pod coming up in a few days. We'll be in touch with you, won't we?
Absolutely. Well, Bobby, thank you for your time tonight and diving into this hard topic that the game of golf has changed forever. We have no idea for what, though. So all speculation to this point, and we can't wait for some more details and maybe some emergency pod. I'm glad you threw that out there.
If I don't hear from you in the next few days, I will meet in with you next week.
Sounds good.
Take care, man. Thanks
Bobby.
Bye.
Bye now.
See you, brother.
Thank you for tuning in to Season 2 of the Pull Hook Golf Podcast. Make sure to hit subscribe and go to www.pullhookgolf.com